Hello, beautiful souls. Welcome back to the Luminary Podcast. I am your host, Annie Perry, professional psychic channel, seer, interdimensional being of light, just like you. Today we are going galactic. So we're going to try this with some music in the background, and it feels fitting. One of the themes that I channeled for 2025 is that it is going to be a very galactic year, that galactic awakenings are going to increase, that extraterrestrial contact is going to increase. And so I wanted to make an episode where I just talk about my galactic awakening, how it came about, what you might experience. If you've already had your galactic awakening, then you know that you had your galactic awakening, right? If you're sitting there wondering, like, I'm not sure if I've had it, then you probably haven't yet. But if you've had a galactic awakening, you know that you've had that part of your awakening. And the truth is that our awakening happens in different ways for everyone. You're getting different pieces of the puzzle, but everything leads you back home in the end anyway. I've been channeling galactic families for almost 4 years, and it has really become a major focal point of myself, my work, what activates so many of you guys. And I think that it's going to be really, really affirming if you've had your galactic awakening or if you're right in the middle of it. And I know that that is where so many of you are right now. And hopefully there will be an aspect of this that's really comforting, because the galactic awakening, at least for me personally, and we'll get deeper into this, it was the most jarring out of all the different awakenings that we have. And we call all of that together the spiritual awakening, waking up inside of the dream, remembering who you are inside of this dreamlike 3D reality. So before we jump into galactic awakenings, I really hope that you have enjoyed the first Presence microdose. That was the short 15-minute episode that I dropped. It is like a meditation, but hopefully you followed my advice and you had your eyes wide open. And it's just such an incredible experience to come back to the truth of who we are and come back to the present moment. So there's a lot of different ways that those microdoses want to manifest through me. So I really hope that you have enjoyed the first one and that you're ready for more to come through. And if you do that every day, 15 minutes, whether you listen to the Presence microdose episodes, whether you have other practices that you do, but if you ground yourself into presence, into the infinite now moment every day, you are going to be living a totally different life in a very short amount of 3D time, right? In a very short amount of 3D time, you're going to live a totally different life. You're going to have so many new experiences, because really the present moment is where all the magic happens. And if you want to accelerate your awakening, start listening to those Presence microdoses and then allow them to evolve through you and through your own daily spiritual practices. My guide sent through the divine download. It was part of the last full episode that I did, the 8 energy themes for 2025. And the last one was presence is the medicine for absolutely everything, for all things. And so what your needs are in this life, in this experience, are different from the person next to you. And that's okay. But presence is the medicine for absolutely everything. And it's really only through experience of that present moment and experiencing the magic that happens when you go through that kind of activation and that kind of instant awakening into deeper truths of who you are. That's where all the revelations happen, right? They happen in pure presence. It's only through experience that you're going to know what the hell I'm talking about. Only through experience. So you have to actually do it to experience it. It's not enough to hear about it. It's not enough to do it for like 3 seconds and then kind of let your mind take over and wander away. You really have to open yourself up to it, and your guides are ready and waiting to meet you there in that moment. So I'm very, very excited for you guys. We have new bundles that are coming out. There's going to be a money bundle, there's going to be a psychic bundle, and there's going to be an activations bundle. And this will be a new way for you to interact with and receive my work and allow it to activate and illuminate you across multiple workshops, courses, activations. They're going to be all bundled together. And so I'm very, very excited for that. Keep an eye out for when that launches and drops. The first place to hear about those kinds of things are, of course, on my Instagram stories. I'm there pretty much every day at I am the Wellspring, and on my email list. And you can join that on wellspringofficial.com. There is, as of this moment, a 2-day free masterclass you can get if you want to start getting into manifestation co-creation. You can get the Law of Attraction free 2-day masterclass. However, fair warning. Okay, so right now it's almost the middle of February. All of that is going to be changing. There is going to be a completely new portal where you will be able to access not just the single free masterclass, but multiple masterclasses, workshops, activations completely for free. And so I'm working with my spiritual team right now to get all of that organized and out to you guys. We're entering a new era, and there is so much change that is coming through. This is an extremely abundant, just full of life and creation year. And the more that you start tuning into your fifth dimensional self, the more you're going to start feeling that abundance, feeling that presence coming into your reality. So I'm really excited to turn up the dial on the abundance with all of the free offerings, put them in a place where you can come back to them again and again and just get more activations, more illuminations, and really get yourself to the level of awakening that your soul is ready to be at. All right, last thing before we jump into this episode, I have been shuffling my deck. So if you hear little like swishy noises in the back, I've been shuffling my tarot deck, and I pulled a card for myself right before I started this episode. I got the Hierophant, which is the spiritual teacher, the keeper of wisdom, essentially like the wisdom keeper spirit guide of the major arcana deck. And then I wanted to pull some cards for you, and immediately 3 cards fell out of the deck. So if you feel like you want to receive this short micro reading, go ahead and listen. If you're like, no, not today, I'm not really feeling it, just kind of tune out for 2 minutes and I'll be done soon. So the first card here is the 7 of Pentacles. This was right on the top of these 3 that fell out. You have this beautiful woman who's watering an olive tree, and really this card is about long-term investments, investing in yourself, receiving the harvest, receiving the returns on your investment. And for me, I just see that so much for those of you who have listened to so many episodes. You've really put in so much to your spiritual awakening, so much time, energy, and attention. You've opened yourself up, and you're going to be receiving a lot of those returns over the next year, probably this week, and even going into just this episode. There is absolutely more abundance for you here. The second card is the 8 of Wands. And so this is really about rapid communication, rapid change, advancement. There's an excitement about it, and it's the perfect card for going into a Galactic Awakening episode, because once you receive these activations, I think for most of you, your Galactic Awakening is going to be moving very, very rapidly. Rapid shifts, rapid changes, collapsing of time, being released from time. These are all topics that we've talked about on the podcast for the past couple of years, and yet 2025 really feels like that 7 of Pentacles card, right? The fruits of your labor. And lastly, we have a shadow card, which is 7 of Swords, and really this card is about kind of feeling like imposter syndrome, feeling like you aren't the right person to be in the room, like you aren't the right person to be sitting at the table, and really reversing this energy, right? So if you are feeling like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here, I don't know if I'm this person, allowing yourself to face that imposter syndrome head on and remember that you are exactly where you are meant to be at all times. There are no mistakes once you get out of the dualistic dimensions. There are no mistakes. Everything is happening in perfect divine timing. And so you are the person to be sitting at the table. You are the person that deserves that seat. All right, I'm going to set those cards aside, so no more swishing in the background. All right, let's get into Galactic Awakenings. And I will talk you through everything that I experienced. I want to go in deeper with my own extraterrestrial contact experiences and really talk about that moment for me, which was about 2 weeks long, of coming into this remembrance, as I would call it now. Back then, I would call it feeling like my brain was being torn in half. But then it all comes back together and you realize that you're okay, the sky is not falling, and everything is going to be much better from here on out because you feel their presence, you feel that part of yourself very supported, you feel more confident going into the other layers of your spiritual awakening. So your galactic awakening, it's a separate layer. It is its own very unique layer, I feel, at least based on my own history and how I grew up inside of this lifetime and inside of the 3D reality. Conversations about extraterrestrials and aliens were for movies. It was not for real serious conversations. My family was never into that at all. They were always extremely religious. They always called things extraterrestrial sightings and abductions, which were really big in the 80s and 90s. They always called that, a hoax, or that person is crazy, they're out of their mind, tinfoil hat people, right? So that's kind of an insult when someone is very into extraterrestrial contact. You call them a tinfoil hat. And actually, as I'm saying this right now, this memory came through of being a little kid growing up in the 90s. And for whatever reason, I don't know who was supposed to be in charge of me growing up. There was really no one. It was just kind of this crazy free-for-all. And I remember somehow I ended up watching the X-Files, and I loved it. I was just obsessed with it, and I wanted to watch more of the X-Files, and I think it got canceled earlier than it should have. But I was a kid watching the X-Files and I thought it was awesome. But then I, grew up a little bit more and I was like, no, that's just TV. Those are just movies. That's not real. I don't want to be one of those weird tinfoil hat people. So there was a lot of projection and judgment. And I definitely went into what I perceive to be my safe space of religion, because religion has found a way that if you have enough cognitive dissonance, they have an answer for everything. So if you're very emotionally immature and you have a lot of cognitive dissonance, religion makes total sense and they've got all the answers for you. And that's definitely how I spent the first part of my life, and I definitely leaned on religion for all answers around the universe. Which even at that, it's just such a small, tiny little box to live in. So it wasn't even questions about the universe. It was really just questions about God. And that's really all religion is it's just you and God, which now it's you are God. So I'll just let that rest. But your galactic awakening is the separate part. And for me, it was the most jarring part of the awakening process because I was not familiar with it at all. It was totally different. It was the antithesis of everything that I had been taught, how I'd grown up, what I believed in. And my galactic awakening didn't even happen until about 14, 15 months into my spiritual awakening. So just briefly, I want to walk through what my personal steps of awakening were as I got up to the actual Galactic Awakening. First one was awareness that I could change. That was like the beginning of everything. Awareness that there was childhood programming, that there were things like trauma that could shape our feelings and our perceptions and our actions and then our lives. This like opened my mind up to realizing I could change. I didn't have to be the same person I'd been. I didn't have to feel the same things that I had felt. And so for me, this was like, you know, how some people talk about like spiritual ecstasy. This was for me just that feeling of like freedom, of like a prison door opening for me. I had thought that I was going to be the same kind of like sad, like emo on the inside. I know a lot of starseeds and lightworkers feel that way because honestly, the 3D reality is so depressing to us sometimes. And I love it now, but now it's on my own terms, right? And so back when I felt that it wasn't on my terms and that everything was outside of my power and my control, it really felt like a prison. And it felt like I just had to be the same person with this heaviness and this weight on me of all of the undealt with traumas, all the undealt with negative emotions, negative feelings. I felt like I just could not escape myself, which is entirely true. You can't escape yourself. You awaken to deeper levels and layers of yourself, and that allows you to go through the process of evolution, which we perceive to be as change, but really it's just deeper and deeper levels and layers of who you already are. So the awakened version of me was always in there, was always with me, and it would come out in those little moments when I would have premonition dreams, when I would feel certain energies about people, when I would feel that I had some sort of psychic gifts, but I had no language for any of that. It would come out when I was a little kid thinking that the X-Files sounded really fucking cool and awesome. And then I would kind of grow up a little bit more and get more programming, and the 3D would kind of take over and push that part of me down. So for me, step one, just the awareness that I could change and the awareness of what the hell programming is and that it is very flexible, that it is very changeable, that you're not stuck with any of that. That felt like prison door open. I'm walking out of here, get out of jail free card. Like I was so elated to have that clear knowing come to me and to have that feeling. It was like happiness and joy and freedom. Okay, I'm like talking about this amazing experience, and literally in the background, my dog just had like the biggest sigh. Like she's so sick of me talking about this. So anyways, moving on to number 2 was awareness that I could create my reality. This was like another door to freedom opening up for me. This sparked my interest. This had me wanting to dive in deep because I was like, if I don't have to be the negative emotions that I've been, and I can create a new reality, and I can create the kind of life I want to experience without feeling like it's so hard and it's so challenging and it's so uphill. That to me, like, I was just like, I am all in, teach me everything, I want to know all of it. And to this day, you can feel that my passion is teaching, co-creation, manifestation, whatever word feels good for you to use. I honestly don't care, I'll use them all because I just love the power and the feeling of reclaiming my power through every creation. Remembering that nothing was ever outside of my power, that none of these external figureheads in the 3D reality ever had any power over me. That was all illusion, that all of the power was always in me, in my hands, in my ability. And then number 3 was awareness of energy centers, that energy was real, that chakras were real. I remember feeling the first one and having this very emotional experience and having this thought in my head of like, oh my God, this is real. So what else have I been told was fake is actually real. And that's what I really wanted to know. And that's why I was so gung-ho when my spiritual awakening first happened. I mean, I was just drinking everything in, like water. Like, I had been in the desert for 27 years and I would just like drinking and guzzling down the water of spiritual awakening. I wanted to know everything. And truly, number 1, number 2, and number 3, right? Awareness that I could change, awareness that I could create my reality, awareness of energy centers, that all happened in a matter of days. It was just one right after the other. Door opening, door opening, door opening. And that really got me started, got me going. And I was getting into not really meditation of like quieting the mind, but I was getting very much into hypnotherapy, healing myself, working through childhood traumas, trying to manifest my reality, and at the same time, just drinking in everything that I possibly could. And that's when my angelic awakening happened. This happened very easily, I would say. It happened in the middle of quarantine, actually. So I was quarantined and I was like sitting outside under the sun. I was listening to a guided meditation with headphones, and I remember falling asleep in the sun, and I had this vivid, visceral vision. When you have a vision, like a psychic vision, it's different than a dream. A dream feels like a dream. It has the frequency and the energy and kind of this like energetic taste of the astral realm on it. When you have a vision, you know that that was sent from a higher dimensional plane, much higher than the 4th dimension, which is the astral plane. And it sticks with you. It is just so vivid and real every time you remember it. And so I had this angelic awakening, this vision of this angelic being that I knew was me and I was her. And yet she was like this exalted being of pure light and radiance, and I could feel how much she loved me and how much she was so happy for me to be having my awakening and how much she wanted to be connected with me and to work with me. And nope, the waterworks are coming. Because the relationship that I have with my angelic self today is like we are one. We are like, if you could see my fingers right now, like my fingers are wrapped around each other. We are just so close. I talk to her more than anyone else in my entire life. I talk to her all day long about absolutely everything. And so I could feel this love and radiance coming from her, and I could feel all of this energy wanted to download into me about her and who I am and the I am presence and what our part is inside of this universe and how interconnected everything is. And it was just the most incredible experience. I remember like jolting awake and opening my eyes and looking around, and she felt so real. I felt like I could reach out and hug this being. And at the time, I was so new in my awakening that my only background about spirituality was coming from religion. So angelics, the angelic realm, that was all familiar enough that I wasn't freaked out, and I was pretty open, even though the religion, the Christianity, the version, whatever the fuck I came from, definitely did not teach that you have an angelic self, that is you, that you evolve to that version of you. And I knew that with such clear, perfect awareness. She wasn't separate from me. She was part of me. She was this version of me, and she wanted to break down the barriers that the 3D reality had built between us. And at that time, I mean, she made a pretty bold move, honestly. When I think about what I know now on spiritual awakenings, what I know now on visions, what I know now on psychic gifts, she made a pretty bold move coming in hot like that and making that connection. Of course, I'm sitting here and there's a rainbow in front of me and there's all of this light from the sun breaking through the clouds and shining right in my eyes right now. So she made a bold move because my psychic gifts were not open at all at that point. And so there was no verbal exchange between us. It was just that it was like she had to centralize all of her energy to get through in just this single moment of clairvoyance. Like she had to choose one. It couldn't be all of them. She had to choose one. And like she gambled it all. And it paid off because I had this feeling from her and from that vision that she wanted to connect with me, but that there was barriers between us and what we now know as the veil, that the veil was between us, and she wanted to help me break that down so that we could have clear communication. And the only guidance that she gave me in that vision, she was holding a crystal in her hand. And it honestly just looked like a rock. It just looked like a rock. I wasn't really super into crystals at that time. I didn't know a lot about them. It just looked like a rock, but it was such a distinct rock that I was like, I can still see it in my mind so perfectly. It was green and it had these like dark green, almost black little rivulets through it. And I went online immediately afterwards and I was like, I have to find this rock because I know that this rock is somehow going to help me talk to this being. And so I like went online, searched like crazy. I found out that it's called serpentine. And she knew that that word meant something to me, which I won't go into right now because that's like a whole backstory. But she knew the word meant something to me in such a way that I would pay attention to it. And so it was a serpentine. You can look them up, serpentine crystal. And one of their uses is angelic communication. And I was like, holy shit, I've got a sign from an angel and like the like things are making sense. Like there's like actually corroboration happening. And so I like ordered one on Etsy and had it delivered during quarantine. And I started getting all of these crystals together and I was like, I'm going to talk to this being. Number 5. Okay, so that's number 4, angelic awakening. That's how it happened for me. Number 5, past lives. So in between time between having that vision and starting to collect these different crystals for all the different chakras, I ended up moving back to Florida. And we still didn't know how this whole quarantine thing was going to pan out. So I was like, I think I have to get back and like go to work, which like LOL, RIP to that job. But I go back to Florida and it's so beautiful there, right? The sun is always shining. It's nearly always a blue sky. And I'm like doing all these meditations and I lay down under the sun. I place all of these crystals that I'd been like ordering online and finding and collecting. I like place them all in my chakras. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, but this just feels right. It feels like I'm going somewhere with this. Feels like, gas in the tank. So I go into a meditation and many of you have heard this story before, but I accidentally busted down the door of my third eye. So I don't always recommend doing what I did, but this is how it panned out for me. Go into like a hypnotherapy session and audio and I'm listening to it. I've got all these crystals all over me and like the sun is shining. I swear, if you want to have a revelation, just sit under the sun. I don't think you really need the crystals at this point. But anyways, I had them there and I went too far. I could feel this like layer in my mind and it felt like this like flexible wall. And I just sort of pushed on it. And all of a sudden, I'm inside of a past life. I can see everything very clearly. I understand like the trauma that happened and what needed to be kind of reconciled. And I understood who the other souls were that were in that incarnation. And when I came out of it, I was seeing color. Like my eyesight was just it went from violet to indigo or indigo to violet. I don't really remember at this point, but I was like seeing color with my eyes open and I was like, am I blind? Did I just blind myself by doing this? No, my regular vision came back and I was able to just see auras and to see energy. And I had this distinct feeling that, my third eye was open and boy, was it open. That all of the quantum chatter after that, it lasted for months. I don't feel like I've had a very good night's sleep ever since that moment, actually. I'm just going to say that here. Sometimes I do have a decent sleep, but ever since that moment, like if you ever want to sleep again, like just stop trying to open your third eye because you are never going to get rest if you open your third eye. I mean, of course, like all of the fun stuff happens at night, and so it's very busy in the quantum field and in the astral realms. You're never going to sleep again, okay? I wake up almost every single night at 3:33 a.m. I wake up at 4:44 a.m. I wake up at 5:55 a.m. I'm just like, for the love of spirit, please, somebody out there, let me sleep. But yeah, busted open my third eye, realized past lives are real. Past lives are a thing. I didn't know how many I had. I was not going off planet at that point, but I was going all the way as far back as ancient Egypt. And I'd always known that as a kid. I'd been very into ancient Egypt. I wished I had past lives in ancient Egypt. And then I would like go to church and then be like, past lives are the devil and like, you're never going to have them. I'm so glad that they're actually real so that my interest is now validated. See, again, it's like that part of you that wants the awakening is always trying to come out. It's trying to find its way out. And then the third dimension just comes and like squashes it down. So don't worry, you're getting out. You're getting out of jail. This is your get out of jail free card. After I busted open my third eye, I started to have messages come through. But I didn't know who they were coming from, right? It was open, but what you have to understand about every energy center is that there's open and closed, and then there's open, and then there's precise. At this point, I was just open. It was just like an open door. I didn't know what the hell was on the other side of it. I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know how to be precise. I didn't know how to channel. I didn't understand energetic standards. I didn't understand pristine energetics that get you a level of clarity and precision. I just had a wide open fucking door to the quantum field. So like messages would come through. I'm like, I don't really know who these are from. And this went on for a while. This went on for almost a full year, all the way into March of the following year. So I would say that this must have happened in April or May, that I opened up my third eye. So almost a full year later, I go to this full moon Reiki group thing on Zoom. I'm living in Connecticut. I've had a few different like supernatural experiences since then. But really, after busting open my third eye, what I really just wanted to do was kind of close the door a little bit so that I could sleep, so that I could think, so I could stop seeing colors everywhere, so I could stop downloading everyone's fucking life history every time I met them. I just needed like a little bit of peace to figure out what the hell was going on here. And I was doing all of this on my own. Most of it was during quarantine. There wasn't all the resources. It was just like whatever you could find online on your own. Like, you're on your own, kid. And boy, did I ever. So I found this woman who was a Reiki healer, and I just knew that I wanted to go to one of her Zoom full moon Reiki things. And I sign up, I go, I see all of these visions during the Reiki session, right? She's just like jamming. She's like channeling. She was superpower, she was powerhouse. And I love her. I honestly don't know what she ended up doing. I know she stopped doing those because they were so energetically like taxing on her, but she was a powerhouse. And I see all of these visions during that time. I'm like, okay, the door is open. I see all these visions, but I just don't have the clarity. Like, I don't know what it is out there that I'm looking for. So she gives you the replay of these Reiki sessions, and I start listening to it. I go home every day after work and I'm like listening to it, and I'm laying down and I feel all of this energy moving through my body. And of course, many of you have heard this story before. On the fifth day, I heard this voice that was just like, hello? Hello, can you hear us? Can you hear us? Hello? And I was like, like there's someone talking in my mind, and it is not me. I knew that it was not me. I knew that I hadn't gotten crazy yet. I knew that this voice was not me. It was coming through the door, but it was like, who goes there? Like, who are you? Because you're just like a voice coming through, and like I can hear you now, and there's something so familiar about you. And that was when my main spirit guide, Thrace, fifth dimensional wisdom keeper, came through, and I started having conversations with him. And it was a little wobbly at first, but I understood immediately that this being loved me, that this being was me, that this being had been with me my entire life and would never leave me and could never leave me and would always be there, unconditionally loving, supporting me, always. I just felt this infinite love, infinite unconditional love, and that was right around the time when my Galactic Awakening started. So at this point, over a year into my spiritual awakening, and just under a year from the time when I accidentally opened my third eye, I've learned so much about spirituality, manifestation, but not really anything about galactics, aliens, extraterrestrial. I'd really kind of skirted around that information. And at this point that I do this Reiki session, I start to be able to hear and talk to my guides, because at that point, now I'm able to communicate with my angelic self. And then I have Thrace, who's my fifth density wisdom keeper self. And I feel that there are more. But I'm like, I don't know who or what you are. And so if I have no context, it's very hard for them to come through and make themselves known. I needed some sort of framework, some sort of context. So really it started with other galactic channels. And I would be listening to maybe a certain spiritual podcast, taking in a lot of information, and then they would bring on someone who was like a galactic channel. And before that moment in time, I would usually skip those episodes. I'd be like, it's not really for me. I just don't know if I really believe that. And I was very, very skeptical. It all just felt, once I did start listening to those kind of podcast episodes and finding those people on YouTube and Instagram and learning more about it, it just all felt so fucking weird. And it felt a little unbelievable. Like, the irony is crazy. It just felt a little unbelievable to me. So I was certainly extremely skeptical. This was the one part of my programming that was very, very strong. It was all about heaven and hell and, very two-dimensional. There was not going to be anything extra aside from that. So you better be a good girl. And even in my spiritual awakening, I was still very much trying to fit my spiritual awakening inside of the context of religion. I would do it all the time. I would try to understand how it could fit in there. And this was when it got so big that I was like, it doesn't fit in there. There's no possible way for it to fit in there. And now, of course, you guys know, years later, I'm very not a fan of religion. That's my nice way of putting it. So I started to listen to these podcast episodes, and I felt skeptical. And on one of them, I heard this woman say, yeah, every day I read the Law of One channel transcripts. And I was like, wow, that sounds so spiritual. Sign me up. Where do I find it? And I had no idea what it was before I started reading. But something about it, just the name Law of One, felt very familiar to me. I was just drawn to it like a moth to a flame. I was like, I have to read this. I feel that I know something about this already. And so I started to read all of the transcripts one by one. And I mean, if you've never read them, and you want to just blow your mind, go ahead and sit down and start reading them. They're all free online. I think it's lawofone.info or .org. And I started to read those transcripts, and it just rapidly, over the course of 10 days, it just started to chip away my third dimensional reality. Whatever I was still holding on to started to chip it away. I would be reading and I would just burst into tears. I would be reading and I would feel like I was having like heart palpitations because I could feel the resonant truth of the transcripts of what was being channeled. I could feel that. The truth of it was undeniable, which meant that the fragile reality I'd been trying to hold on to felt fake. It felt false. It felt like the part that was not real. So there was this complete switch of what had previously felt unbelievable and unreal was now concrete reality. I could not deny the truth of it. I always tell my clients and my students, like, energy does not lie. It can't lie. Energy is truth. And so I felt energetically from those transcripts, like, this is what is real. And everything I'd been holding on to, I suddenly realized, like, this is fake. This is the false reality. It started to feel like I felt like my reality was being peeled back. I felt like my brain was being split in half. I felt like my skin was being peeled off. I felt very exposed, and I immediately went into like the cycle of grief. Because up until that point, I still had this very deep attachment to religion. I wouldn't even really drop religion completely until right kind of around this time, within this sort of 2-month time frame. I still had an attachment to it. I still wanted it to be real. I still wanted it to be truth because it's what I'd been told for 27 fucking years. That's what I'd believed in. Like, this is what I thought reality was made up of. This is what I thought about where you go when you die and where you come from and like why we're here. And so all of a sudden everything's just like peeled off, peeled back. I felt so exposed. I remember I would just like cry in my bed, in my condo, in Connecticut. I would just like crawl under the covers and I felt like the sky was falling on top of me. While simultaneously, I also felt like all of these beings in outer space were watching me. And I felt so exposed to them. Like, they can see me and they can read my energy and they can read my thoughts and like they know everything I'm thinking and they know everything that I'm doing. And it's funny because in religion, like, they teach you the same thing about God, you know, and the same thing about fucking Santa Claus. But they teach you like the same thing. And for some reason, because it wasn't real, I just never really felt it. But all of a sudden, these extraterrestrial beings are what is real. And I can feel them. I cannot deny them because I can feel them. I could feel their eyes on me. I could feel that they were watching me, which really is just my awareness of them there. They'd always been there. They'd always been there. But now I just have awareness that they're there. And like, they're still there, always watching me, but now it doesn't bother me at all. Now I love it because I'm like, excuse me, can I get some help with this? Like, excuse me, can you make all the traffic go away? Excuse me, can you make the snow go away and the sun come out? Can you bring in early spring? That'd actually be great for me. You know, like, sometimes my relationship with them is just so unserious, but I love it. They love it because we're in the frequency of love together and we're connected in that frequency. And when you have that feeling of real fifth dimensional love, not attachment like we experience in 3D reality, you know, all that lovey-dovey relationship, most of it's just complete bullshit. What you see in so many of those relationships, it's just attachment. It's expectation. There's a corruption of the energy. But when you feel that pure, pristine, I expect nothing of you, and I love you unconditionally forever, all of eternity, I don't even have the ability to judge you. And so I never have, and I never will, and I never can. When you feel that level of love, you're like, that is what is real. They don't have the ability. They've evolved beyond the frequency of separation and duality and judgment. When you feel that purity of love, There's just something so undeniable about it. But at first, it really freaked me out. It really freaked me out, and I had this feeling of being exposed and very panicky. I had to go through a whole grief process with religion and what I was taught and the people that taught it to me, and that whole part of my identity just feeling like it crumbled underneath my hands. Like one day it was there holding me up, and the next second it was just ashes flying away on the wind. And finally I'm standing on real solid ground for the first time, and I'm 28 years old. I'm not like 16, I'm not like 12, I'm not like 22. I'm like 28-year-old adult feeling solid foundation, unconditional love for the first time. The first time. I mean, yeah, that'll sure as hell wake you up. So I went through that grieving process, but I had the law of one. I had these channeled transcripts. So even though I didn't know all the questions to ask these beings, I didn't even know who they were. I didn't even know all the names of all the different galactic families. Like I was like just rolling blind through it, okay? But I had the law of one. And so I could just keep reading because they'd already, this group of beings had already sent through so much transmissions and so much information to help give me context and a framework and an understanding and to reacquaint me with that frequency. And even though I did not understand everything that I read in there, and I definitely did not understand that even what I was reading, there is so much more nuance, because they can't channel through absolutely all of the nuances and all of the kind of exceptions and all of the stories because of how dense the reality was back in 1981. The channeling back then was so slow. It was so slow. And then you fast forward that to 2021. So I'll just go back to when I started channeling them. You go from that to 2021. You come all the way here to 2025, right? I told you in the last one, it feels like we're in a Maserati. We are in that Maserati. Okay. So if you imagine channeling back in 1981, that's like a Model T Ford plunking down the road. And then you come here to 2025 and it's like I pull up in a Lamborghini, okay? Totally different. Everything is so much faster now. There's so much more nuance. It feels like you're in a totally more advanced technology. Like in that time frame, we went from flip phone we went to like the newest iPhone, like the best that you could possibly imagine. Like think of something even better than that. I'm sure they're out there. I don't know where, but it was just such a huge quantum leap. And while I'm reading those transcripts, I can feel these beings. I can feel this love radiating from Ra. I can feel their presence. I can feel their love. I felt like everything would be okay. I just needed to kind of get through the grieving period. And so I would cry to Thrace, right? Because I did not associate Thrace. This is so funny now. I did not associate Thrace at all with these galactic beings. I was like, no, Thrace is like this etheric being. Like they're totally different. I didn't even realize until a couple years later that Thrace is really just an amalgamation of 8 Arcturians, the 9D council that I'm always talking about. So it's so funny to me, like they're projecting all of their energy into Thrace as my spiritual guide to kind of give me one point person that is them. But because I don't understand the context and all of the questions that I could ask them, I could have found out way back then, but I don't know all the questions to ask. And so they're just like listening to me cry to them about aliens, and they're like literally aliens. They're like, oh, it'll be okay. You're fine. And something that I remember so vividly from my Galactic Awakening is that that was the first time I started to get light codes, right? Like activation light codes, like words that would activate a dormant part of your memory. So the first one that I got was Galactic Federation of Light. I remember hearing that and just thinking like, I know what that is. I've never heard of it in this lifetime. It sounds really weird, but I know what that is. And I don't know how to tell you how I know, but I just know that I know what that is. So yeah, of course, everything was just making perfect sense. Anyway, so I knew like that meant something. So I started learning a lot about them, and I'm going to talk about them today because they were such a big part of my Galactic Awakening. And they're usually kind of the first like touch point for a Galactic Awakening because they are so close to the planet. And so many of them are just you in your extraterrestrial form trying to help yourself out. So I am going to talk more about them and then kind of the differences between my own, being very connected to the Arcturians and how we kind of branch off from the Galactic Federation. So that first light code was Galactic Federation of Light. And the second light code was Adonai. And you'll see that if you read the Law of One transcripts. It's kind of how they say farewell, right? But something that I've talked to Ra a lot about and many other galactic families is, what's like the deeper meaning of that light code, of that light language. And they're like, it's kind of similar to saying like, I see or I recognize spirit within you. I recognize the divinity within you. And that is a way to greet and to say goodbye. Like they wouldn't really say goodbye because you can't actually ever separate. So you say like, I see spirit in you. I recognize spirit in you. The same way that in the Vedic it's namaste, right? I recognize spirit within you. So those two came very strongly as some of my activation codes. Right when I saw them, I felt dormant parts of my memory start to unlock. I felt like someone was kind of pulling at the back of my head, pulling at the back of my mind, and it's like doors were opening back there. I mean, I don't know what kind of sensation you're going to feel, but it feels, like that saying, like something's like tickling at the back of my mind. I'm trying to grab it, but it just keeps kind of slipping out of my grasp. And that's okay if you feel like I remember something, but I can't really get the picture of what it is that I'm supposed to remember. It's because the picture is so big and so vast that you can't grasp all of it at one time. It's an unfolding. It's like someone unfolding and unrolling a painting. You're acquainted with each part of it as you begin to take it all in. So I had these kind of two different points in time where things were converging for me. I had these channel transcripts from the 1980s, right? That felt like these beings were talking to me right here, right now. I mean, there's such an activation. And then I had different galactic channels that were channeling right now and posting, new podcasts and new YouTube content. And so many of them would talk about the GFL, the Galactic Federation of Light. And in the Law of One channel transcripts, they talk about, well, their old name. They've rebranded since then, which is hilarious to me. They used to be called the Confederation of Planets in Service to the One Infinite Creator. And then they realized that in translation down to, species and civilizations such as ourselves, that was really long, especially in English. Maybe in other languages, the translation may have come through a little bit shorter, but it was just so long. And in America, especially, confederation is a word like the Confederates. We never say that word. It's kind of got the ick on it. So they were like, okay, it doesn't really matter how correct our translation is. If it's not resonating with them, then we need to find a way for this to come through with the right frequency, because that's really all that matters. So they did some rebranding between 1980 and the 2020s, and they started becoming known as the Galactic Federation of Light. Now, if you talk to any of them on the ships, they would probably say Galactic Federation of Planets in light and service to the one infinite creator. Okay, so we've shortened it down, and we've shortened it even more to just calling it the GFL. And the GFL is great. They volunteer their services. They don't have to find groups to serve and to be of service to through this way. This is just the way that they have chosen to do it in our local universe. And so they are a group of beings, and it's all groups that are service to others. So they've already chosen their path. They've already gone through third density. They already know that they want to be of service to others and that their frequency wants to ascend in light. And what they found is because of other beings in our universe who did not choose the path of service to others, that one of the ways they could be of service to others is to try to help those species who are more vulnerable, like ourselves, who are in third density or just coming out of third density, very vulnerable state because you start to have some galactic communication, but not everyone on the planet has chosen their path of service. Some of them are still going to keep incarnating on the karmic path. And usually there can start to be a lot of interference from those beings who are service to self. So the Galactic Federation saw an opportunity, an opening, that they could be of service to others by helping those species and protecting the law of free will. That's primarily what they do. They also read a lot of timelines, like there's a lot more nuance to it, but the overarching idea is that they want to help protect the law of free will by ensuring that all self-aware beings in our local universe and any planet, any species that they're working with, that each self-aware soul has sovereignty to exercise their free will. Now that's a pretty tricky order because you can't violate someone's free will by saying, hey, you need to be nice to everyone and you can't start a war and you can't blow that up and you can't do that or this and enslave all of these people, because that would be violating their free will. So they can't go around telling all of the, I'll call them baddies. You can't go around telling all the baddies, like you can't blow that up and you can't light off that nuclear bomb. What they can do is help other souls remember that they have free will, that they have sovereignty, that they are in charge of themselves, that they do not have to relinquish any power to any other being in the universe. So by reminding other souls of this divine truth, they're able to help. And a lot of you guys work for them. Some of you might feel very resonant with being a GFL ambassador. There are a lot of channels out there who are like, I am an ambassador of the GFL. And the GFL will confirm that too. They'll be like, yes, we have a group of ambassadors. That's their English word for it. The Arcturians, I don't know, we're just so serious. We call them agents on the ground. Like, it does sound a little more serious than ambassador. Ambassador is definitely like the Pleiadians came up with that, it's got Pleiadian written all over it. So you might find yourself resonating with that idea of like, I feel like I'm a GFL ambassador. And what's funny to me now that GFL was one of my light code awakening codes is that I actually don't work for the GFL at all. I'm not a GFL ambassador. I work very occasionally for them as an emissary. And so emissary is basically someone on the ground will say, the GFL will be like, we really have this message that we would love to get through. Would you be willing to transmit this message? And so I can say yes or no, or I'm busy or whatever. And I'm sleeping, like, for the love of God. I can say whatever I want. And I really have not gotten any calls from them in like over a year. The last time I was hanging out with them was when we recorded that episode, the Pleiadian Council of Light, right? Those are like the GFL, right? That's like the main, you're like dialing up the GFL galactically, like the Pleiadian Council of Light is going to pick up and be like, hello, this is the GFL. Pleiadian Council of Light at your service. What's your favorite color? And like they want to know too, their favorite color is rainbow. So if you see a rainbow, they might be trying to send a message. But yeah, I don't actually work for them and I'm not actually sent by them. So it was kind of funny to me when I started to wake up more into my galactic role and my mission and get more in touch with the Arcturians who actually sent me. I feel like it took them longer to get back in touch with me than so many of the other galactic families, but that's all right. They've got infinite patience. So yeah, I haven't done any emissary work for the GFL in over a year. I'm sure there will be more in the future. I've talked to the Pleiadians before so the Pleiadians have a frequency that's closest to humans, Gaians, and that's why they could potentially be the first ones. They will be the first ones. I'll just say that. They will be the first ones that actually make any kind of physical contact. The Arcturians are vibrating too high, and so direct contact with them is going to take a lot longer. We have to get our vibration up to kind of match and meet them in between. But I like the GFL. I think they do a great job. I think that they have really pure intentions. I've talked to multiple different species who work with them. They really work a lot with the Council of Saturn, which I think is very important. They get guidance and advice from many of the different Arcturian councils because the Arcturians feel a responsibility for Earth. And we'll get into that more in just a moment. But really at the kind of heart of the GFL that's working specifically with Earth on Earth's ascension is the Pleiadians. And they feel a very deep connection to us because we are inside of Adamic templates. And the Adamic templates have gone through an evolution through the Pleiadians. They're not Pleiadian templates, but they've gone through an evolution with them. And so I feel like in a lot of ways, they kind of see us as their thesis project, right? They want to ascend. They want to continue going deeper into the densities of consciousness. They want to continue their own evolution. And in order to do that, they have to find beings to be of service to. That's how you gain polarity. That's how you gain the fucking kudo points of the universe to continue your own ascension. And then I would say that they lean also a lot on the Sirians, and the Sirians absolutely see themselves as, if the Pleiadians are the sisters of humanity, the Sirians are like the big brother of humanity. They care so much about us. It's kind of astounding too, because even though they have worked, the DNA architects of Sirius have worked on these Adamic templates, they didn't create them. They just feel this sense of resonance with the project, with the creation, and have offered so much of their services to humanity, to the GFL, to however they need to get the job done to help our civilization through ascension. And of course, the Andromedans are supporting them, and the Antarians as well. Ra and the Venusians, right? The Hathors, Quo, Latwi, Ra, all of them on Venus. I've never really asked them, but they do identify in the Law of One as being a part of the GFL. But they're much more in like this kind of advisory role and less hands-on these days. But boy, when they decide that they're going to get hands-on, I mean, that's when you get something like the Law of One transcripts, where it's just like every single word is just filled with potent activation. And that is the frequency of the Venusians. It's just so powerful that they don't even need to be like, they just sent something, 45 years ago, and it's still working the magic today. They're like, whatever we do, it is so strong, it is so powerful that we only need to do it once, and it's great. And it is so great. No, but really, they're actually like the most humble beings. And what I've learned from channeling so many different galactic families at this point, years later, they each have this tone to them, like an energy tone, a tenor, frequency. It's distinct. I can feel it so distinctly. Connecting with the Pleiadians is different than connecting with the Sirians, even though they kind of see themselves as like brothers and sisters working together. Connecting with the Venusians, it's so distinct. And yet there just aren't words in the human language, in English language, to describe the differences. Like, the only words we really have are like, well, I feel this immense unconditional love radiating from them, but it's like, how do I translate the difference that I feel between the Venusians, which is so different from the Pleiadians, which is so different from the Sirians, which is so different from the Arcturians? Like, their flavor is each completely unique, and yet I'm just left with like these 3 words: immense unconditional love. This is why the Greeks had 7 different words for love, because Greek is actually an Arcturian light language. Yeah. They knew. So the Arcturians are definitely part of the GFL. They would identify and say, yes, we're part of the GFL and we're so happy to be of service and we want to help you. But not all Arcturians are representing the GFL. That's not all of their mission. In fact, most of the ones around the planet right now would not pick up the phone and say, this is the GFL, what's your favorite color? They would say, this is the Arcturians. Are you done with that planet yet? No, I'm kidding. They wouldn't say that. They love us. They really do. They really love this planet. They love this planet like nobody's business. Nobody loves this planet, I feel, as much as the Arcturians love this planet, and would really, 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 really love if we would not blow it to smithereens, okay? They are the ones that will show up at the nuclear sites. If you've seen different UFO documentaries, etc., people talking about how extraterrestrials showed up at nuclear sites and they turned off all the lights, and they said, we're basically saying, like, we can turn all of this off and stop whatever you try to do, so like, don't even try it. Those are the Arcturians, okay? Because their mandate, what they would say their mandate from source is, and what they are told directly by the Elohim and the archangels is, we need a group of extraterrestrial beings to oversee all of the local Akashic records. And this is your mandate. This is the most important thing. And they take their jobs very, very seriously. I swear, like, every Arcturian is a Capricorn. And that's why I'm a Capricorn. They take it very, 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 very seriously. Because Earth is a living library. It is an extension of the Akashic records. It is a garden planet where so many codes and templates are kept. Is a very important planet. So because that is their mandate, they are able to say things like, the planet's survival with all of the records intact is more important than humans flexing their free will of blowing those templates up. And that is what allows them to interfere. That is what allows them to step in and say, no, you're not going to do that, because this mandate actually trumps your mandate of free will. So we're going to step in and stop you. You can do whatever the hell else you want to each other, but you cannot blow up these templates. We're going to stop you from harming them, and towing that line of honoring others' free will versus preserving this planet and taking care of their mandate is what they spend almost all of their time thinking about, working on, working towards. That's why they send souls like me here to remind, activate, illuminate them so that more of them choose to live in harmony and their free will is not violated, because their free will does not drive them to explode places where we have put these sacred templates, and we are not going to allow them to explode them. Are you catching my drift? And that, I think, is why the Arcturians have a different flavor about them. And I think that is also why we come across as a little bit bossy and a little bit overly concerned about the planet and the templates and like what's going on here. And I'm at a place with them where I really trust that they've got it in hand and they'll do exactly what they need to do. but they also need those who are on the ground to hold a higher frequency so that it doesn't come to them having to make those interferences. That's what would be ideal, is if they did not have to step in, if they did not have to interfere. That would be the highest timeline. And that's why so many of us who are Arcturians are here and activated and awakening and doing the work that we're doing. So some of what they do overlaps with the GFL, and they work with the GFL, and many Arcturians will join the GFL and board GFL only ships and kind of have like galactic careers aboard those ships. But if you call up the Arcturian ships, you're probably not going to get any of them that say, this is the GFL, what's your favorite color? They're going to say, we're the Arcturians. What do you want? No, I'm kidding. Sort of. Kind of. A little bit. No, I'm kidding. I really am. They're so nice. They're super nice. We're the nicest, aren't we? Don't you think I'm nice? Yeah. Anyways. I mean, they do sound a little bit cranky in some of the transmissions if you read We the Arcturians. They do get a little cranky. Yeah, I get cranky too. A lot. A little. So some niche channels talk about the GFL a little bit negatively. Some of them are like full blown, will just like trash the GFL and say that they're all dark beings and they're going to try to enslave us or whatever. And I just really would love to know from those channels, like, what frequency are you tuned into? Because those people tend to be, they didn't clean up their frequency enough when they started channeling. And so then they started tapping into third dimensional information. And so then it started to crack and fracture, and they started to channel this fractured information and then kind of mesh it with galactic information, which tends to be fourth dimension to fifth dimension. And I think that, those channels are just on their own journey. They're going to figure it out in their own time, in their own way. There really aren't, I get a lot of people who are like very worried about themselves being on the path of service to self. And I'm like, trust me, you're not. like, are you Genghis Khan? No, you're not. You've never even done anything like that. Most of the negative beings that we have on this planet that irritate me, are being bullies, especially right now, that are being bullies to others, they're not even service to self entities. Most of them haven't even decided what path they're going to take. They're going to leave this incarnation. They're going to go to another planet. They're going to live out all of these stories for like another 1,000,000 years and then make their decision. Especially those that seek out power in this current lifetime. So it's very hard for me to take them seriously because I'm like, you haven't even chosen what you want to do. Like, I am here from 200 years in the future, and I have already decided what I'm going to do. Like, I just really need you to kind of stay out of my way while I do my job. And so it's hard for me to take them seriously. They get on TV and they're like, oh, I have lots of money, I have lots of power, and I'm just, a big boogeyman of third dimension. And I'm like, it's just so hard for me to take you seriously because I know energetically that you're not. Energy doesn't lie. And there's a certain amount of everyone's Akashic records that's like available for public download and for others to be able to see and perceive. So Akashically, it's not really hidden information. Anyways, that was a side rant. So let's get back to just wrapping up my Galactic Awakening. And I do want to kind of end this talking about my physical extraterrestrial contact experience. That sounds like a banger to end it on. So the timeline is basically March, April, May of 2021. I'm having this Galactic Awakening, and I already know from December of 2020 that I was going to go to the desert. I didn't know how it was going to manifest. I didn't know when, but during this Galactic Awakening, it feels so clear. I need to move back to the West Coast, and on the way, I'm going to go through the desert. And there are some things that are going to happen in the desert that are going to change everything. I don't know exactly what's going to happen, but I know that I'm supposed to be there. It's like a date with destiny, like do not miss it. And so I'm a little freaked out. Like, I'm excited, but I'm kind of freaked out, just to be real with you, because I had a feeling that it was going to be some sort of extraterrestrial contact. You know, now I'm talking to them, I'm talking to beings on the different GFL ships. I'm starting to get acquainted with all the different species, and I'm starting to understand, and I just know that, like, something about the Arcturians and me go together. I just know that. And what's so funny is, as I was writing my notes for this episode, I was like, when did I remember that I was Arcturian? But really, there's no one place. It was just kind of like always known in the back of my mind. And I remember I would do like these little quizzes online. You can go, like, if you Google, you know, galactic families, which one am I from? You'll find all these little like starseed quizzes. And all of mine were like, you are an Orion soul. And I was like, I am an Orion soul. And I am. Like, that's where I first started having incarnations here. And so I didn't join the Arcturians until after I started incarnating on Orion. So, like, I'm Orion, but I'm also Pleiadian, and I also have Sirian, and I'm also very much Arcturian. And so it kind of comes back to you in waves as you start to remember each species and the time that you have spent with them. And then your soul mission, what you're supposed to do in this lifetime, what you want to do in this lifetime, starts to come through even stronger. But again, the picture is never perfectly clear at the beginning. It's an unfolding. So I pack everything up and I go across the country. I pick up my friend who's going to drive with me. I pick her up in like Texas. And I remember getting to New Mexico, and I just knew, you know, New Mexico. New Mexico is where all of the action happens, right? And they've got a bunch of like the extraterrestrials opened up a portal there. And so it's much easier for them to come through the portal and start to vibrate down. They got a downshift into third dimension. Usually they stay in fourth dimension, and only when they absolutely have to will they like blip into third dimension and then out, because the frequency of third dimension, it's so low, it's dualistic, it starts to fracture their energy, it starts to confuse them. It is very confusifying for them. And so they do not like to spend any amount of time, if they can help it, in third dimension. So if you see a ship and then all of a sudden it's gone, now you know why, because they're like, they just can't spend that long. It really drains their energy and confuses them, and then they have a much harder time getting home. So if you hear about ships that crash, usually they were in third dimension too long, they got confused, they lost control of their ship, they crushed it, they have to remember how to get the hell out of there, or they have to leave the incarnation that they're in. And that may or may not leave behind some sort of physical trace. It depends on the species. So anyways, I get to New Mexico, and I'm in Carlsbad, New Mexico. Like, if you know, you know. I'm at this, like, it's the nicest hotel in Carlsbad. It's like one of the shittiest hotels I've ever stayed in. Like, I'm sorry, no shade if you live in Carlsbad, New Mexico, but I was just like, where am I? And we were only going to stay there one night, and then we just keep driving. My friend is sleeping in the bed next to my bed. So she's in the same room as me. And I just know going to sleep, I'm like, there is a ship waiting for me. Like, they came, whatever is going to happen right now. And I start to kind of reach out to them and to my spirit team. And I'm like, I'm a little afraid of what's going to happen. I was just not at the point that I am now with the comfortability level. And I'm like, I'm a little afraid. So can you wipe my memory of whatever you're going to do? Like, I'm totally okay with you doing it. I trust you. But can you wipe my memory? Because I just don't think that I can get up and act normal if I remember everything that happens. And they're like, yeah, totally. Like, no problem. We've got you. You want your memory wiped? Like, bing, like, done. Order received. And so I lay down in this bed. I'm like staring at the ceiling. I could like feel their presence like bearing down on me. And all of a sudden, I just go into a deep sleep. And then I wake up. And I wake up and I'm sitting up inside of my body, but my physical body is like laying down. But I'm like, it's so hard to explain when you're in your astral body and your temporal body. This is what they call it, your temporal body. So what they needed was they couldn't take all of the physical body to the ship because it might give me radiation poisoning, right? And it can be pretty dangerous. But what they'll do is they'll call in your temporal body. And so your temporal body is like your astral body plus some. And so they're like gathering up my temporal body so I can feel everything physically. Normally in your astral body, you're kind of like, you're not really like a ghost or a spirit, but like your hand can like move through something. If you're in your temporal body, if that part of you is attached to your astral body, then you can feel things on a physical level. So I'm sitting up and I'm like opening my eyes and I'm in my temporal body and I see this being next to me. It's an alien. And they're short. They're about like a little over 3 feet tall. And we're in the hotel room and I can see my friend sleeping behind the alien who's standing right next to my bed. And they have this like grayish, greenish, purplish skin. At first, it just looked gray, but it's because we can't really translate the color that they are with our eyes. We don't have the color spectrum. So when I pull it up in my Akashics right now and I rewatch all of it, it's like gray, but then if I look a little bit this way, it's like green. If I look a little bit this way, it's like purplish and not iridescent at all. But it's also like not really physical because they're not in a chemical body. Right? They're in a 5th dimensional body and they're vibrating, they're downshifting their vibration just very quickly. And they have 2 big, black, glossy eyes. But I wasn't really looking at that. I was looking at like their head shape. Their head is quite large and a little bit elongated. And I just feel this love coming from them. Like you would think that this is a part where I would scream and like run away. No. Like once they're there with you, their frequency radiates all around you. And I was just like in this bubble of love. And I don't really want to say ecstasy. It wasn't quite like ecstasy because I didn't really have access to that frequency until they did what they did, which I'll describe in a moment. But it was just this feeling of love and oneness and home. And I just felt like I trust this being more than I've ever trusted any human that I've ever met before. And I think I had this like smile on my face, but I like reached out my hand and they had 3 fingers. And I was just like, that is the most normal thing in the whole universe, that you have 3 fingers and you're an alien and you're standing next to my bed. And I just feel so at home and at oneness and comfortable with you and wherever we're going. And I trust you completely. And I remember feeling their hand. And right when our hands touched, there was this flash of light. And then all of a sudden, like same exact moment, flash of light. And I'm being lowered back down to my bed, temporal body, getting reconnected and everything, put back into chemical body. And I'm just laying back down inside my body, happy as can be, content, felt warm, very warm. And I could feel their hand physically touching me. And it was almost like they gave me this extra little like pat on the hand. And then they were just gone. Just gone. Just like there, one blink, and then you blink and they're gone. And they put me to sleep, which is really helpful. So I went back into a sleep and then I woke up. I remembered everything that they had not wiped from my memory. So let's talk about wiping your memory. First of all, they can't really wipe your memory. They can bury the memory, right? So everything that you ever experience is written in the Akashic records. And what they can do is they can bury it down so it feels like you can't remember that certain thing. And we do this subconsciously, like we bury trauma, things we don't want to think about. We bury unnecessary information. We just kind of shuffle all of that down to the bottom of the Akashics, and we keep up top what is most important to us. So they basically said, like, you're going to have an experience, and like, we can bury that for you if you feel like you're going to be too freaked out to remember, because you are, whatever we don't bury, you are going to remember. The experience is going to be too visceral because we're working on your temporal body. So there's like not a chemical aspect, but there's a physicality to it. You're going to know. You're going to know. How are they going to know? They're going to know. So I'm glad that I did that initially, because I don't think I would have been able to like correctly function the next day. But I do remember when I woke up, it was very vivid. It was very visceral. It was almost like I could feel the tingles on my hand where we had touched. And they didn't even need to grasp my hand. All they needed to do was just touch me. And they'd be able to take my temporal body to the ship, do whatever work they need, bring me back down, put me back inside, tuck me in, kiss me goodnight, put me into a deep sleep. Really anything, just a single touch. That was all that they needed. And the next morning I woke up and remembered everything that they hadn't buried. And I could almost like feel the ship out there somewhere. And I could feel them saying, bye. And I'm like, bye, see ya. Thanks for the upgrade. So I knew it was an upgrade. And what is that? What did they actually do? What got erased from my local Akashic records? So they took my temporal body up to a ship. The ship was perfectly round. The room that we were in was perfectly round. There were beings around me, but I could not see all of them because they were vibrating in fifth dimensionality, right? And so not all of them felt compelled to vibrate downshift, only the one that needed to bring me out of the room and then back into the room. Because they wanted to work on the physical body, they needed my temporal body. So they couldn't just call my astral body up from the fourth dimension and say like, hey, you just come here in your astral body. They needed a little bit more. So that's why they actually had to send someone to get me and to bring the temporal body to them. And I was laid down on a type of table. Everything in the room looked white to my eyes. And that's how it would look to any human's eyes. It would look different if I was in my astral body. When I go out to the ships in my astral body, which I can do now anytime I want, the ships look different on the inside than being in my temporal body. In my temporal body, everything around me looked white. It looked like it was just radiating with this white light, like I was surrounded by it. It was very clean. It was very pristine. It kind of reminds you, honestly, of like a doctor's office, but everything is like glowing white light. And I felt perfectly calm and peaceful. I didn't feel afraid. I felt that I knew what they were going to do and that I had asked them to do that before I came to this incarnation. So what did they do exactly? Well, they did a kind of scraping out. That's their word. So they needed to clear out a bunch of debris and like scrub down my temporal body, which would translate perfectly to my physical body. So basically they needed to get rid of a ton of dense energy from third dimension, get all of that out. So there's kind of like a scrubbing down, a scraping that needed to happen. And then when they were done with that, they needed to fortify my mind. So they kind of put these like protections around my mind so that when I became a channel, I would not go crazy. I would not go into a state of psychosis. So it was like, we need to clean out all of the old energy, because as I went deeper into the desert, that's when my guides came through and taught me how to do energy readings. And just a couple of weeks after that, I was doing energy readings for other people. So basically I needed to go through an upgrade to have a very clean, pristine energy. and fortify my mind so that as I started talking to all the different spirit guides, that I would then begin to channel all the different angels and ascended masters. Like, one of the first beings I ever channeled was like a seraphim, right? So that when I channel these beings of immense power, I didn't lose my mind. I didn't go into a state of psychosis. I didn't start to question, am I crazy? Is this real? Is this not real? I was able to very much hold on to third dimensional sanity while also channeling all of these other dimensions and being opened up to my multidimensional self, my higher self, my I am self, without going nuts, basically. So they kind of put this light technology around my mind. When I see it, it kind of looks like this just like perfect helmet of light around the brain and around the skull. And what's interesting is they call that body that they use, the part that's connected to chemical body, the temporal body. And what's interesting is that if you look at human anatomy, the temporal part of yourself is like right behind your jaw. And so when they put this kind of like helmet of light around to keep my sanity in place, thank you, it's kind of connected in those spots, the temporal spots on your own head. But what's interesting about this technology is that it would allow me to keep my sanity, to keep my presence in the 3D, and to still be able to tap into other dimensions when I wanted to, instead of it being, like how I opened my third eye and I just started seeing things. And that was a very jarring experience for me. I still haven't slept since. But instead of that happening, I would have much more control over it. And that's what my guides were going to teach me. They're going to teach me how to have precision, how to have control over it, how to tune into what dimension you want to go into, and then get out of that dimension without getting stuck. So that technology would allow me to do that while holding on to my sanity. And it would also allow the veil itself to start naturally dissolving, so that I do have access to all of this information, all the Akashics, all the different dimensions, all the different guides, without being stuck behind the veil. Because that is where most people are. They're trying to push through the veil, and the veil is disintegrating on its own. But I needed this kind of extra protection, and I asked for it because I knew what I was going to do when I came here, that I was going to be a channel and I was going to start channeling all this information into this dimension. So when I was planning this lifetime, my guide said, you should allow us, the Arcturians, that's who helped me. I used to call them the short grays, right? So if you look back in old episodes, I called them the short grays because I didn't have all of the information yet. And I thought that they were the short grays, which I'm fine with. The short grays are great. They're super nice, very helpful. But a lot of people confuse the short grays with the Arcturians because they can also look like that when they downshift into 3D. And the Venusians can also look like that when they downshift into 3D, which they pretty much never do. So you're really only going to get a short gray confused with an Arcturian. So for like 2 years after that happened, I kept that part of my memory blocked off, and I didn't look. I didn't really want to look. Even when I started channeling a lot of galactics and everything, I didn't really want to look.
And I thought for a long time that it was the short grays that came and did the upgrade for me. And it was only after I started having a lot of contact reconnected to the 90 Arcturian Council that I was like, I should probably look and see what it is that I buried and who is helping me. And so it was Arcturians honestly, it's always been Arcturians all along, right? Thrace is just 8 blue Arcturians. What I thought was the short grays, just the Arcturians. The Arcturians all along. Sounds like a children's story or something. So anyways, yeah, that's something that I asked them to do and contracted that with them. So what's important to know about the contracts that you make with extraterrestrials is that hell or high water, they are going to fulfill that contract. And I think this is why sometimes people have extraterrestrial encounters and experiences, and they're like, they get salty afterwards. They're like, I feel like I didn't choose to do that. And it's like, you did choose, you just chose before
your incarnation. And because you contracted them to do that, they're going to do whatever they have to do to fulfill that contract. Like one way or another, they are getting it done. Which is why when I went to New Mexico, I had this feeling of like, this is inevitable. Like no matter where I go, like this is going to happen. I had that feeling coming through from them of like, you need this upgrade. And like now is the time. So now, like no matter where you go, we're going to find you and we're going to complete this upgrade and we'll bury the memory if you want to. They would have buried all of it if I wanted them to, or if I wasn't really in the right place to understand what was happening. But thankfully, all of the other pieces had fallen into place. And so I was in a good spot to not go crazy, not have a meltdown, not try to run and hide from them, to be sort of in acceptance, but then also ask them like, hey, can you just blot it out? Because I don't know if I'm ready to handle all of it. And right after that, I went into the desert. My guides were like, okay, great. You've got what you need energetically. So this is how you read energy. This is how you read chakras. This is how you channel past lives. This is how you open the Akashic records. This is all of the etiquette of how to do psychic readings for others so that it's in a high frequency, very clean, very pristine, doesn't open the doors to negative energies, negative entities. They taught me how to deal with all of that. That might come through in the astral realm, which is really the only place where that lives. And they taught me how to open the doors in such a pristine energy that all of these other spiritual teams would be wanting to work with me, trusting my intentions, trusting my training, trusting my energy. This is why I'm able to channel so many different beings. This is why beings approach me all the time, some that I haven't even completed my work with, and they're like, can we do something with you? Can you channel us? Whenever you're ready, can you please put us on the list to channel? And so I have a whole list of entities and the ideas that they've sent through. I mean, I've got Metatron on the list for like next. I've got to get back to the 90 Arcturian Council. They always have stuff that wants to come through. The Hathors have been asking me for over a year to do a channeling session and to channel about them and their species and how they want to help humanity. So because of the way that I've been trained to handle energy, instead of me going out and trying to reach these guides, they come to me and ask to be on my list. And I think that that's a testament to how important it is to value pristine energetics over just being able to channel anything. Because you could tap into an entity in the astral realm who's like, yeah, I'm definitely Metatron. Let me tell you how to take over the world. And they would just think it's the most hilarious, funniest thing to entrap you and ensorcel you in and confuse you with. And then they would just go on their merry way and disappear. And you're like, yeah, Metatron definitely told me that I am an archangel that's meant to take over the world and gain all of these followers and create my own cult. And then, the real Metatron is out there just like trying to do their job, just trying to help people. And they've got, some random YouTube video out there that's like, take over the world, Metatron said so. That's how these things happen. Because someone was more concerned with being able to say that they can channel Metatron than actually being able to channel Metatron. You might wonder, well, gosh, if you have all these entities that want to work with you, how come you're not, jumping the gun and doing all of it and working with every single one who asks you? Wouldn't you want to do that? Sometimes. It's not more important to me to be able to say I can channel them than to channel them at the right time, in the right frequency, highest good for all, pristine energy, super, super squeaky clean energetics. That's what's more important to me than people being like, shake and channel Metatron. Like, if you applied yourself to your psychic gifts in the way of pursuing pristine high frequency energetics, that level of training from your guides, you wouldn't think it's a big deal that you could channel Metatron. You would just know that Metatron's always there for you. You would just know that the Hathors and Ra and Council of Saturn, they're always there for you. All of these beings always there for you, willing to work with you, wanting to send transmissions through if you will allow, but you will also have your own sovereignty, your own integrity intact. That's way more important to me. And I've said this before, but I'll say it again. That prioritization is why these entities want to work with me and why their door is so open to me. And I think as you get deeper into your own galactic awakening, your own psychic gifts, you're going to have that moment of realizing the higher the frequency, way more important than being able to be like, oh, I can channel the Syrians or the Andromedans. Our priority should always be frequency first, frequency first, frequency first. So if you want to start connecting with your galactic families, with all of these different spiritual guides out there, if there's someone out there that you're like, I just really want to get in touch with them. Most people are like, how do I get in touch with Ra? How can I talk to them? Well, if you've read the Law of One channel transcripts, you'll know that Ra is one of the pickiest about how they will channel and who they will channel through, and the way in which it should be set up so that their frequency stays intact, highest frequency. Ra is very particular. I mean, the Venusians as a whole are known for being very particular because typically people want to tap into their sixth density self, occasionally the fifth. Sometimes you get the fourth, but they really prefer to get that sixth density self. And in order to do that, you've got to have squeaky clean energetics. And it's not that they're saying, you as you are is not good enough. What they're saying is the energy of third dimension is dangerous. It's the only place where danger exists out of all the dimensions. And because of that, in order to protect you and to protect their frequency, they would rather you work on your frequency first, cleaning that up, getting into a high frequency, knowing the energetics of squeaky clean energy, than just connecting with you in a lower frequency just because they can. They're protecting you as much as they're protecting themselves. And whenever I talk to the Galactics, I'm always like, all right, like, what do you want me to tell everyone about you? And they're always like, if you want to have communion, right, connection with us, to be able to commune together effortlessly, it is all about cleaning up that third dimensional frequency and getting yourself much more anchored into fifth dimensional frequency, into a heart-based frequency, into a clean, pristine environment, not worrying about, have I healed all of my trauma or any of that stuff, but really focusing on present moment, fifth dimensional energy, a clean, pristine environment, letting go of those habits that are maybe, drug use or drinking too much, any of those addictions, letting go of that, letting that energy out, asking your angelics to come in, heal your aura, seal your aura, because the higher your frequency, the more energetically protected you are, the more you're in the frequency of wholeness and you're not in a fractured state. The fractured state is what allows the negative entities in, because they only exist in the fractured state, right? They are essentially the fracture. So focusing on cleaning up the energy around you. It's no mistake, and it's no pre-planned supernatural experience that I'd be able to hear my guides very clearly after doing 5 days worth of super high frequency Reiki energy. The super high frequency Reiki energy cleared away enough of the third dimensional energy for them to have clear communication with me. And even still, they had to teach me all of the steps to get into a higher frequency so that we'd be able to have communication at any time. So I guess I say that to say this. your galactic family is already looking to reconnect with you. And if you can focus on your energy, the purity of your energy, the wholeness of your energy, and getting more and more of your presence into that fifth dimensional state, you won't need to go out looking for your galactic family. They will find you. I really hope that this was eye-opening for you. I hope it gave you lots of insights. If you enjoyed this episode, I would absolutely love it if you shared it with a friend, someone who might also think that it's interesting or who is also going through their galactic awakening. And as always, I'm so grateful for each and every one of you. You already know that I will see you on the next one.